Hello everyone, welcome back. In today's video we got another news and rumor video to discuss. In today's video we're looking at a handful of signings from over the past couple of days. We got a couple of interesting news updates, and we've got some trade rumors involving the Bruins, the Islanders, the Flames, and a couple of other teams, which all that updates coming up right now. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video here at the End-to-End Hockey channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like this video and subscribe down below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. Don't forget to stay tuned for my June 27th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time, June 28th at 10 a.m. Mountain Time, and July 1st at 9:30 a.m. Mountain Time live streams talking about the draft, free agency, and everything in between. So don't forget to stay tuned for that. But in today's video, we've got another news and rumor video to discuss. So as usual, lots of intriguing signings. 10 signings to talk about here first up, so we got a lot of things to get through here. I'm just going to go through some quick hits because most of these are lower end signings. So first, in the Dallas Stars organization, they have signed AHL player Cameron Hughes to a 2-year contract extension with the AAV of $775,000. He's an AHLer, can maybe be a call-up option at some point over those 2 years, so very interesting note there, but some added forward depth there for the Dallas Stars. He's a center. The Colorado Avalanche have extended Jason Pollan, who's a depth forward, on a 1-year contract extension with the AAV of $775,000. Pollan, AHL player, maybe eventually could be like a bomb 6 forward. He's 26-year-old right winger, so I think he's probably going to be mostly an AHL player this upcoming season, so very interesting note there. The Avalanche have also signed Matthew Steinberg to a 1-year contract extension with the AAV of $775,000. Steinberg is 24-year-old center. He got into a couple of games of NHL action. I think it was like around 15 games, got a couple of points. Like, he didn't look too bad in his little stints at the NHL level. So I think maybe over this time frame he can be like a call-up option or maybe even a bomb 6 forward. So pretty good pickup there for the Avalanche. The New York Rangers have extended defensive prospect Matthew Robertson to a 2-year contract extension. Once again, league minimum. Robertson's 24 years old. He's a left shot defensive prospect. He's gotten some opportunities over the past couple of years at the NHL level, but he's mostly been an AHL level guy. So I think this year he'll probably most likely be an AHL guy. Could easily be a call-up option though. So some add depth there for the Rangers as they bring back Robertson. We saw the Calgary Flames also bring back some depth as they signed Dryden Hunt, a 29-year-old winger, to a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $825,000. Hunt had been bouncing around over the past couple of years. I know he was in Toronto a little bit. I think he was in Colorado, and there was a couple of other places too. He spent last year in Calgary, mostly an AHL level guy, got a couple of stints at the NHL level, so I think most likely he could be a bomb 6 guy at the NHL level this year for Calgary. I wouldn't be one bit surprised if he was an AHL player who was a call-up option. So very interesting note there about Hunt signs in Calgary. One of the original Seattle Kraken expansion picks is re-upped as the Seattle Kraken have signed 26-year-old left shot defensive prospect Cale Fleury to a 2-year contract extension with an AAV of $890,000. So a little bit more expensive than these past couple of signings we've been talking about. Fleury's a decent depth defenseman. Like, he's not going to put you up a whole bunch of games played, but he's a solid left shot defensive guy. He's gotten some NHL action over the past couple of years, not much. So I could see him challenge like a 3rd pair role, but wouldn't be surprised if he was a AHL player who was a call-up option. For interest note there. One of the more surprising deals we saw from our past couple of days was in Dallas, as they've extended the young center prospect Maverick Bourque, who played his first full season at the NHL level this year. He's 23 years old. He gets a 1-year contract extension with an AAV of $950,000. So Bourque, in his first full season at the NHL level, had 11 goals and 25 points in 73 games with Dallas. Looked pretty good as a bomb 6 forward. Now, after the Marchment deal, the Duchesne deal, a lot of people thought that if the Stars were to keep on signing some of their players, that Bourque was going to be an offer sheet target, similar to a guy like Dylan Holloway last year, where a team could sign him between like $2 and $2.5 million, and the Stars would be hard-pressed to match it. Well, he ends up taking a little bit of, I guess, team-friendly deal at only signing for $950,000. It's a 1-year deal, so he'll be able to be RFA again next year, but that's a pretty solid deal if you're a Dallas Stars to get Bourque on that low of a contract. So brilliant piece of work there from Jim Nill to keep Bourque and not allow him to become an offer sheet candidate. So very interesting note there. Then we saw Dallas Stars sign another one of their younger defensemen, and that's Nils Lundqvist. Lundqvist, who had 5 assists in 39 games this year. Another one of their RFAs. He's a right shot defensive guy. Can play 3rd per minutes. Had a lot of injury troubles this past year. Signs a 1-year contract extension with the AAV of $1.25 million. Like, I think he can be a solid 6th, 7th defenseman. If he can start to become healthy and is not going to be injury-riddled season again next year, this could be easily a solid solid third pair defensive signing there for the Stars. It's not a bad signing there, though I thought he would probably hit the free agent market, so very interesting note there. And then we saw two very interesting big-time UFA signings. This first, it was in Carolina, as bomb 6 forward Eric Robinson, who actually had a pretty good season in Carolina, signed there in the offseason, went up having 14 goals and 32 points in 82 games in the Hurricanes' bottom 6, did enough to earn himself a 4-year contract extension with an AV of $1.7 million for the Carolina Hurricanes. So that's a beautiful piece of work there for the Hurricanes. Robinson's been bouncing around over the past couple of years. He was in Buffalo a few years back. He had a short stint in Columbus, spent this year in Carolina, and he seems to have found a home in the Carolina Hurricanes organization. So I don't think this is too bad of a contract. Is the term a little bit much? Maybe. I think a 2 or 3 deal would have been better for Robinson, who's already 30 years old. But $1.7 million for a really solid bottom 6 forward who can put you up between 10 and 15 goals. That's not a bad contract in my opinion for the Hurricanes. So very good sign there for Carolina. And then the last signing we got here to talk about is actually with the UFA. The contract cannot be finalized until July 1st, but it was a UFA who did not play at all last year, and that is Jonathan Toews. We talked about Toews, how there were a ton of teams interested, the Leafs, the Jets, the Avalanche, the Bolts, and there were a handful of other teams who would have loved to add Jonathan Toews. But he has officially signed. It's a handshake agreement because no official agreement can be in place until July 1st. But Jonathan Toews has signed a 1-year contract extension with the Jets with an AV of $2 million. Now, base salary is $2 million. He has the ability to earn upwards of $5 million in bonuses. I think it's for like playing 20 games, 30 games, 40 games, 50 games, 60 games, and then winning playoff series. It's like he's able to get upwards of $7 million on this deal, but the base salary is $2 million. So if he can work out as like a second or third line center for the Jets, I don't think it's a bad contract, depending on how many bonuses he's able to get. It's an alright deal for right now. Like I said, if he gets into upwards of like $5, $6, $7 million after the bonuses, that might be a little bit pricey for the Jets, but if he gets like under $5 million and works really well as like a second or third line center, I call that a win there for the Jets. So very interesting note there. But Toews, who is from Winnipeg, is heading back home to play with the Jets, so very interesting note there. Those are our signings from the past couple of days. Headlined by Toews signing with the Jets, Robinson signing with the Hurricanes, and Dallas signing Bourque. So very interesting note there. Next, going over to a couple of interesting pieces of news. So when it comes to some interesting news updates, we've got a couple of interesting things to talk about here. So first, when it comes to the NHL, they are actually investigating the Evander Kane situation. Evander Kane missed the entire season due to long-term injury reserve and the first game of the first round of the playoff series due to injuries, but was back for game 2. Apparently something caught the NHL's eye that's made it investigate the situation. You remember, you can't just have players be placed in LTIR and wind up not being able to play. Like, there has to be an actual reason for it. Like, we've seen Tampa do it with Kucherov, Vegas do it with Stone, Florida just did it this year with Tkachuk. Like, tons of teams have done it. So I do really wonder why the NHL is just figuring out what happens with the Kane situation, and I do wonder if there's maybe some sort of a penalty that comes from it. Like, I'm not exactly sure, but it does seem like the NHL is sort of investigating the Evander Kane situation when he was placed in long-term injury reserve, so very interesting note there. Then we saw retirement. Longtime AHL player Gabriel Dumont, who got a couple of stints at the NHL level, putting up 4 goals and 9 points in 90 career NHL games, has officially called it a career and is retiring. Very interesting note there. Dumont was a decent AHL type guy, bounced around a couple of seasons, but he never really got his foot in the NHL level. So even though he had a long stint in the AHL level, got a couple of games at the NHL level, he's officially called it a career. Not sure what's next for Dumont, but we wish him the best in retirement. And very interesting note there that another guy has retired over the past couple of days. And lastly, going over to 3 teams and hiring assistant head coaches. So first, in the Philadelphia Flyers organization, they have hired Crawford, who is the Vancouver Canucks video coach, and Reardon, who is the Pittsburgh associate coach, as new assistants. We know the Flyers are trying to work out Rick Tocchet's staff, so it makes sense that Crawford, who is in Vancouver, and Reardon, who is in Pittsburgh, both join Tocchet there, given the fact that they both have connections to Tocchet. Reardon with his time in Pittsburgh, and Crawford with his time in Vancouver, so very interesting note there. But it seems like Rick Tocchet's staff is starting to come together as they have signed a few assistant coaches, so very interesting note there. The Pittsburgh Penguins have hired 3 players as the assistant coaches. As we talked about in our last video, they have hired Nick Bonino, who was playing overseas this past year, as the assistant coach. They've also hired Nelson, who is the AHL head coach of the Hershey Bears, which is Washington's AHL affiliate, a team who won back-to-back Calder Cups, and Clune, who was the Anaheim Anaheim Ducks assistant, have all joined Pittsburgh as assistants. So Bonino, we talked about, he was a former player, played in Pittsburgh for a couple of seasons. He's joining Dan Muse's staff. Nelson was a really solid AHL head coach. He's joining Pittsburgh's staff. And Clune, who was an assistant in Anaheim, also had a pretty good stint over with the Ducks. He's going to join Muse's staff, so interesting note there. And then the Boston Bruins have hired Spott, if I'm correct, who was Dallas's power play coach the past couple of years as their assistant. So very interesting note there. Spott had been coaching with Pierre DeBoer over the past couple of seasons, really liked coaching with him. Now that DeBoer's gone to Dallas, he winds up taking an assistant coaching job in Boston. We had talked about how the Bruins are looking for one more assistant. They seem to have found it in Spott, so very interesting note there. But the Bruins have hired Spott as their new assistant coach from Dallas. So very interesting note there. But the Penguins, the Flyers, and the Bruins continue to round out their coaching staffs by hiring some very interesting assistants. So very interesting note there. And lastly, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So lastly here, going over to a couple of trade rumors. So we got a handful of things to talk about here. Lots of rumors. Things are being picked up. We're going to have a lot more rumor videos and trade videos coming out next week. But in today's video, we've got 7 things to talk about here. So first, with the Edmonton Oilers, according to David Pagnotta, we talked about in our last video how Elliot Friedman said there would be a market and the Oilers will be looking to move Evander Kane. Apparently another name, which isn't too surprising that the Oilers are looking to move, is Victor Arvidsson. I think it's safe to say, and I think most of you will agree with me, the Arvidsson signing was a terrible sign there for the Edmonton Oilers. Arvidsson was injured all throughout the regular season, and when he was healthy, he was more of a third, fourth liner instead of a top 6 guy. In the playoffs, he did all right, but he was healthy scratched a couple of times in the Edmonton Oilers organization for guys like Jeff Skinner and Kasperi Kapanen. Like, that deal really never worked there for the Edmonton Oilers. He signed for $4 million for one more season, and I think he also has trade protection. So it's going to be a hard deal to get out of, but trading away $4 million would free up a lot of the Oilers' cap problems and be able to allow them to make a lot more moves. So I'm not going to say it's a guarantee given how hard it'll be to trade Arvidsson, but it definitely does sound like Arvidsson's name is out there according to Pagnotta, and to me it makes a whole bunch of sense. Kane and Arvidsson, I think, are the 2 biggest trade chips for the Edmonton Oilers to try and free up some cap space, and given how poorly Arvidsson played last year, I think it makes sense. So a very interesting note there, but keep your eye on Victor Arvidsson. Very likely chance he winds up getting moved, and I completely agree with that. Next, going over to Nick Kyperos. He was talking about the Vancouver Canucks, and he says that the reason the Vancouver Canucks have so much interest in Bo and Byram, not only to try and upgrade their defense, is to get insurance in case Quinn Hughes leaves. Now, this is something I keep on hearing over the past while from Canucks media and a couple of other things. Like, I don't think there's been any guarantees or anything, but there seems to be some concern about Quinn Hughes staying in Vancouver. Now, we know that Quinn Hughes has 2 brothers and they both play in New Jersey. So I've kept on saying to the people who I've been talking to, if, and that's a big if, Quinn Hughes doesn't want to stay in Vancouver, the one place I think he wants to go is New Jersey to play with his brothers. And it seems that the Vancouver Canucks are really concerned that is a major possibility. I'm not sure. I think Quinn Hughes wants to stay in Vancouver, like I think he does, but part of me wonders maybe he winds up walking as a free agent in a couple of years' time. Like, he's got this upcoming season and the next year left on his contract. He's going to be on pace to be making like a 10, 11, even $12 million defenseman with how good he is. So it'll be very interesting out there. Like, I still think Hughes is going to be a Vancouver Canuck for a long time, but given all of the reports that I'm seeing about the Canucks being cautious and potentially gearing up for life without Quinn Hughes, like, part of me wonders if maybe there is a chance Quinn Hughes winds up getting moved or signs as a UFA elsewhere. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen with Quinn Hughes, but apparently the reason the Canucks have some major interest in Byram from Buffalo would be as Quinn Hughes insurance. And that makes sense. Like, if, and this big if, Quinn Hughes does leave, Byram could step in as like a top pair left shot defenseman. I think in a top pair role in his hometown team, he will be able to thrive in that sort of a role. And even if Quinn Hughes stays, I think he'll be a solid second pair left shot defenseman behind Quinn Hughes. So I think the interest in Byram is expected from Vancouver. I think they're going to be one of the teams who has some major interest in him. I just think it's quite surprising that I keep on hearing the Canucks trying to make sure they're getting ready for life without Quinn Hughes, because I still think Quinn Hughes is going to stay. So very interesting note there. We're going to have to keep our eye on Quinn Hughes in general over the next couple of years, but keep your eye on Bo and Byram as he could potentially be heading to Vancouver, so I'll have to wait on that. Next, going over to Stefan Rosner, he was talking about the Philadelphia Flyers, Boston Bruins, and New York Islanders. He mentioned that the Philadelphia Flyers and Boston Bruins both have major interest in Alex Romanov. He also mentioned that the Bruins have some major interest in Jean-Gabriel Pageau, and it was either him or D'Amico who was saying that the Bruins and Islanders are having talks around the 7th overall pick. Now, I think think a lot of people have been hearing rumblings about this. The Islanders had the first overall pick. There's a lot of people who are expecting them to go after Matthew Schaefer. But there's a lot of people who also think if they can have an opportunity to trade into the top 5 or top 8 while Hagens is still on the board and trade up to try and get James Hagens, they would try and do that to try and get Hagens and Schaefer in the first round, which would be a very interesting thing there for the New York Islanders. If Hagens does fall down to 7 with Boston, that could be some sort of an interesting deal there for the New York Islanders. Now, according to Rosner, he says that Pageau is drawing interest from around the NHL. Boston's a name who seems to have some interest. He says that Philadelphia and Boston have some interest in Romanov. Now, Romanov, similar to Noah Dobson, is also an RFA. He needs a new contract, and I think there will be a ton of teams who would have some interest. Romanov's not going to put you up a whole bunch of points, but he's a solid defensive-minded top 4 defenseman, and I think for a Flyers team who doesn't have a whole bunch of really lethal defensemen, and a Bruins team who just traded off a guy like Brandon Carlo, it would make some sense for them to go after him. And I think the asking price according to Elliot Friedman was pretty high on Romanov, so I'm not sure if they'll wind up trading him, but I definitely could see him getting moved. When it comes to Pageau, the Islanders need a clear cap space. We heard this from Pagnotta a couple days ago. Pageau's making $5 million in the final year of his deal. Teams need center help. I think could try and target him, so we're going to have to wait and see on that. But I definitely think that the Islanders and Bruins, as well as the Flyers, are all linked here. I think the Islanders are trying to move off some pieces. Romanov makes some sense. Pageau makes a ton of sense. And I think if they could trade into top 10 or top 8, they would try and do so to try and get Hagens. So I'll have to wait and see on that. But keep your eye on the Islanders and the Bruins. Could try and be working together to try and make some sort of deal work, maybe around the 7th overall pick. So I'll have to wait and see on that. Next, going over to Frank Seravalli. He was talking with the Philadelphia Flyers on his DFO Rundown podcast recently, and he says that the Philadelphia Flyers have been actively looking for a goaltender. Now, I've said this before. I think I said in my offseason preview series video. The goaltending for the Flyers is not the best in the league. Urson and Fedotov, they're both decent goaltenders. They can work as like 1B, maybe backup goaltenders. Neither are clear-cut starters. The Flyers, if they do want to try and improve and start to turn up the heat and get better, I think they need to go after a solid starting level goaltender, whether that be Gibson, Demko, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, Merzlikins, whoever it is. They need to try and go after a starting level goaltender. Apparently, according to Frank Seravalli, they have been checking on the goalie market. So I'm not sure if they'll acquire them. The goalie market this year is very, very slim. Like, there's very slim pickings. UFA market, there's not a whole bunch of goaltenders. In the trade market, there's a handful of guys, and those guys are probably going to cost a whole bunch of draft picks or assets to try and acquire. So it'll be very interesting out there. I'm not sure if this is the right offseason for the Flyers to address goaltending. I still think they should try and tank and maybe go after McKenna next year. But definitely does sound like they are at least interested in trying to add a solid goaltender. So very interesting out there. Going over to the Anaheim Ducks, according to David Pagnotta, he mentioned that the Anaheim Ducks are apparently now willing to retain money on John Gibson. That is a very interesting concept. Before over the past couple of years that Gibson was on the trade block, could wind up being moved, but the Ducks really were never interested in retaining money. But now they could be interested in retaining money. That could make it a lot more interesting. Gibson has 2 years left on his deal at a $6.25, I think it was, $1 million cap it, or 6.4. So if the Ducks were retain enough money to make him like a $5 million, $4.5 million goaltender, that would make him interesting for a lot of teams who need starting level goaltender. I'm looking at Carolina, I'm looking at Edmonton, I'm looking at a couple of other teams who could use some starting level help. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But the Ducks saying they will retain money on Gibson is going to be very interesting. I think it would make Gibson a lot more of a hot commodity, and I think the Ducks could get like a first round pick and a solid prospect in a Gibson trade, because that's usually what top end goaltenders go for. So we're going to have to see on that. They could try and run with Gibson. They'll stall, try and make it to playoffs next year, but I definitely think they could try and trade Gibson, get more of a backup, and let those stall run with the net this year. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but keep your eye on Anaheim, as according to David Pagnotta, the Ducks might be open to retaining money on Gibson. And to me, as a person who I think Gibson does need to be traded and get a fresh start, that makes total sense to me. If they can retain a little bit of money, I think the Ducks would be happy with the return they could get. So very interesting out there. And lastly, going over to the New York Islanders, there was a report that came out. I'm not sure which insider announced this or things like that, but there was a report out there that said that Noah Dobson, who's an RFA right now in the New York Islanders organization, his opening number for trying to get a new contract with the Islanders was $11 million on the AAV. That's pure insanity in my opinion. Dobson, do not get me wrong, He's a good defenseman. He had a 70-point season just 2 years ago. Last year was definitely a down season for him. But he had a 70-point season over the past couple of years. I think his ceiling is like an 80, maybe a 90-point defenseman. I think that's Dobson's ceiling. He's a top pair, right shot defenseman who has a lot of really good offensive capabilities, and all his defensive game could use a little bit of work. It's still not the worst in the league. $11 million is insane. I think only 2 other defensemen are making $11+ million, and that's Dahlin and Doughty. I don't think he's in that sort of a realm of being paid that much money. I do not believe that. So, in my opinion, that's way too much. Like, I think Dobson could be like a $8, maybe $9 million defenseman. 11 is insane to me. So after that, Elliot Friedman says that the Islanders were at least exploring the market for Dobson. There's no guarantees they were considering moving him, but they were at least exploring the market. So I don't know what's going to happen here. Dobson is number 12 on my last end-to-end hockey trade bait list, which I'll be updating in a couple of days' time. Don't forget to stay tuned for that. Check out my blog if you haven't already. But Dobson wanting $11 million, like, I'm not sure if the Islanders are going to want to pay him that. So would it make more sense to trade him, maybe get a little bit worse, be a big part of the McKenna sweepstakes, and maybe get like a first-round pick, top-end prospect, and really good roster player in return? It might make more sense with the New York Islanders, especially if they're getting Matthew Schaefer right now. So we're going to have to wait and see on that, but after asking for $11 million for his first time in the contract negotiations, I'm not sure if Dobson's going to stay in the Islanders organization, and I think a ton of teams, even if he was to get like $10 million from another team, I think there would be a ton of teams who would love to add a top pair right shot defenseman with a lot of offensive upside. So we're going to have to wait and see on that. But that's what I'm talking for today. I left you guys' thoughts. Could you see the Islanders move Noah Dobson, or does he sign for a huge amount in NYI? Do you think that the Ducks retain on Gibson if he was to get moved? Do you think that the Flyers will acquire a goaltender? Do you think that the Bruins and Islanders could hook up on a deal involving Pageau, Romanov, or the 7th overall selection? Do you think that the Oilers move Arvidsson? And do you think the Canucks could try and go after Byram as Quinn Hughes insurance? Definitely let me know your thoughts on all of that down in the comment section below. That's all I'm going to talk for today. Remember to like this video, and for that, to subscribe below. Thank you for all of your support. I would never be able to do this without all of you guys. So if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe button down below. Don't forget to leave a comment. Don't forget to stay tuned for June 27th, June 28th, and July 1st live streams. I also do a blog, talk about news, rumors, analysis. If that's where, check that out. I'll leave a link to that down in the description below. Can't wait to see you guys all for the next video. See you guys soon.